The Bears' stranglehold on the top pick loosened a little bit. The Chargers, they've cleaned house. Chip Kelly has the most sensible plan for college football I think I've ever heard. All that and more coming up next on the Draft Countdown Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Bossards, joined tonight by my co-host, Brad Menendez, filling in for Shane P. Hallam, who's doing some daddy duties tonight. But, Brad, we are 126 days, 22 hours, 58 minutes, 12 seconds away from the 2024 NFL Draft.
Man, and with all the bowl games happening and college football kind of nearing its conclusion and us inching closer to the playoffs, the draft season's almost upon us. I mean, if you check out the website draftcountdown.com, you're seeing all of our mock drafts. Travis's mock draft I combed over this week and had a blast looking at it and going, man, Travis is way smarter than me. And it's just been a good time. But first, Shane, I hope kiddo's doing well. You take care of him, and we'll miss you tonight, my friend. But it's a good time. It's an exciting time. We got Christmas. We've got all the fun holiday stuff. Plus, we still have a lot of football to see. I'm excited. It's a good time, and I'm glad to talk to you tonight, my friend.
I'm glad to have you in here, and you are absolutely right when you say that draft season, it's already here. I've seen the numbers from the mock drafts and everything on the site. There's a lot of fan bases that's already checked out on the NFL season, my friend. But let's I want to remind everybody that if you're following along live in the chat on YouTube, go ahead and send us a question there. We'll answer it at the end of the episode. If you're watching live on Twitter, you can send us a question at Draft Countdown. We'll answer that there as well. Or if you're on our Discord, drop a question there. We'll answer it there as well. If you're not a member of Discord, you need to join up. Go to draftcountdown.com, top right corner of the search bar. There's a link to join the Discord there. We would love to have you there for some nice discourse on the NFL, college football, or whatever. We don't care. We'll talk about everything.
Music, movies, and everything in between.
That's right. Quickly here, we're going to wrap up the college football coaching carousel because there was only one head coaching job open after everything else is shaken out, and that was at Troy. And they have hired Notre Dame offensive coordinator Jared Parker to be their new head coach, replacing Summerall, who went to Tulane.
Yes.
So,
how do you feel about that? That's an interesting move. I didn't necessarily see them going after Parker.
I saw this from my guy, Craig Stevenson, writer for AL.com, said that this is the third head coach out of the last four that Troy has hired with ties to Kentucky. I thought that was interesting to me. They've done well there with Neil Brown and John Summerall, and now Jared Parker. So we'll see how that works out for him.
I do like Parker's energy, though. When you watch the sidelines in Notre Dame and you see, obviously you don't see a lot of them, but what you did see, I was like, he could rally the troops and really get Troy back to where they need to be. Because Troy's produced some really strong NFL talent over the years.
So. They've won over 20 games the last two seasons and only lost 3. John Summerall's done a great job there, and they've got some NFL talent on that team this year. They play Duke in their bowl game coming up. We're talking about a little bit later. They've got some guys on that team, including one that will be at the Senior Bowl we talked about last week, Javon Solomon. and a couple other guys. I think one other guy I think could actually end up on the Senior Bowl roster for it's over. So let's look at the top 10 of the NFL draft currently. We did have some minor movement, I guess. The Carolina Panthers actually won a game. And that loosened the Bears' lead on that just slightly. Percentage, I don't know who come up with these percentages, but the Bears currently have an 85% chance to get the top pick with Carolina's pick, but the Patriots are up to 10% because they lost again this week. They're now 3-11. Arizona comes in at 4%. They have played a much tougher strength of schedule, but right now Carolina and New England both have played the same strength of schedule, so that would be wild if that ended up tied and they ended up tied. Then we'd have to have a coin flip at the combine, right? Yeah. For the number one pick in the draft. We haven't had one of those in a while for the top pick. But Arizona currently picking third. The Commanders, less than 1% chance. They're currently picking fourth at 4-10, but they've lost 5 games in a row. Chicago's own pick, now they're 5-9. They blew it. They blew the game this past week, right?
Yeah. I mean that was a tough one because they really should have, with all the turnovers they got off Flacco, they really should have won that one.
Tommy DeVito got knocked down to earth a little bit this week. The Giants lost to the Saints. They dropped to 5-9. The Jets lost again and kept Aaron Rodgers from trying to get back on the field. Poor guy. Won't see the field this season. Although they are activating to the 53-man roster, which I thought was weird, but okay. The Tennessee, we're going to skip over 8 for just a second. The Tennessee Titans, another team that blew a game this past week that could have helped the Bengals out a little bit, but they didn't. They're 5-9, and Atlanta 6-8, coming in at the 10th pick. They had the same record as Green Bay and Las Vegas.
I definitely think it's an interesting top 10, especially because most likely it's going to be, 1, 2, or 3 picking one, right? Like New England, does Bill Belichick leave? Is New England going to try to push for that number 1 pick? I mean, they aren't playing very inspiring football right now. So it's like, okay, are they trying to get to the one, because Carolina's not trying to lose, right? Like you could tell watching them Sunday, as much as they aren't a good football team, they're not trying to lose. They're trying to do their best. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these top 3 teams is really trying to get that number 1 pick.
Right. We got another head coach firing this week, and after the way they played Thursday night, you knew it was coming. Brandon Staley ousted as the coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, along with their general manager, Tom Telesco. Was very easy to see this was coming, right, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, you can't lose that bad to the Vegas Raiders and keep your job. I mean, they were playing okay, but you could tell that really sealed it for them. I mean, the team just didn't rally. And, and I don't blame them. The quarterbacks were not great, but Vegas barely, I mean, that game week before against Minnesota was tough. So it's like, what are we doing here? And then that happened. It's like, oh, this is over.
Yeah, they go from Vegas goes from scoring 0 the week before, losing 3-0 to dropping 63 points. It's just crazy. But this is, despite having a franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert, this is not an enviable situation for a GM or a new head coach to come into, right? Currently, the Chargers projected to be $45 million over the cap. And they, I don't know how they fix it. I was looking at some of the numbers on, I think, overthecap.com, and Khalil Mack, you would save $23 million if you released him, but you'd have to eat $15 million in dead money. Joey Bosa would save $14 million against the cap, but you'd have to eat 22. Mike Williams would save $20 million, but you'd have to eat 12. Keenan Allen would save $23 million, but you'd have to eat 11. So either you're going to eat a lot of dead money, or you're going to be kicking the can down the road a lot.
Well, yeah, when you look at, I just have Spot Track up, but when you look through their contracts and the guaranteed money, I mean, they spent a lot of money on just a few players. I mean, and then once you get down to the guys that are making big money, there is no way to get out easily. I mean, and the guys that they do owe money to, I mean, you've got, like Rashawn Slater's guarantees like over 16 million, but he's young. He's a part of what you're trying to do in the future. But, then you look at guys like Corey Linsley and some of the names you mentioned. I mean, it's not, I don't know how you fix this. Like you are going to be in trouble for a couple of years. And then by the time you're out of trouble, you're going to have to pay Justin Herbert, right? Like you're going to have to keep giving him more money.
Well, Justin Herbert got the new deal this offseason.
Right.
And
it's only,
so
5 years?
Right. But you can't do anything with his contract for a while. Right. So I don't even think this is a situation like the Saints, where the Saints are in the proverbial can kicking down the road. They do it every year. Their cap guy is the greatest of all time. So,
right.
So I don't know. I don't envy them in that situation.
Well, I mean, they're gonna have to find teams that are willing to take on some of them contracts, right? Like they're gonna have to trade, big pieces and hope that there's teams with lots of money that want to take them. I don't know if it's possible, but
I mean, I don't think you're going to get many or you're not going to get much return back for Khalil Mack. I mean, I guess the best in that situation would be Bosa, if that's indeed the piece that you're going to trade out. Like I said, it's not an enviable situation at all.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is that they still have strong core in terms of the defense isn't bad. You've got a young quarterback. Obviously, you've already started paying him. I mean, but you're going to have to let some of these aging guys that are maybe close to the end, just let them go. Like Nino mentions, Eckler. There's some guys that you aren't going to be able to bring back, and you're going to have to lean on some younger guys or UDFAs in certain situations. And it's not, like you said, it's not an enviable position, but it can be fixed if they bring the right people in. Now, the question is it Harbaugh? Is it Belichick? You're seeing all these names floated. I don't know that either of those guys are really going to fix this situation, but it'll be interesting to see what they do.
I've seen enough over the last few years to know that I don't want Bill Belichick in charge of personnel. So I don't know if that's the right call there. We'll see. I do think he's out in New England, though, when the season's over. I'm curious. I'm curious. It's a thing that I'm very curious about. All right. I asked you before we went on how much you saw of Chip Kelly's, what I think is a perfect solution to the current state of college football, which has just gotten goofy, especially from a realignment perspective. And I think that's the main crux he was coming at it with. So I'll go through some of the high points here. He said he thinks college football needs a commissioner a la the NFL. I agree. He thinks that basically as it stands right now, there's like 130 teams or 130 plus teams in the FBS. His solution is to take like the top 70 or 64 or 70 teams and basically break them off into two conferences. Kind of almost essential what the Big Ten and the SEC's done already with half that number. But, I guess group in the ACC and the Big 12 and the Notre Dames and a handful of others. And those are your top two. And basically those are now two conferences. Then at the group of five level, they also, and then you regionalize the two big conferences, not unlike the AFC. You see where he's going here. He's basically trying to NFLize the college football, essentially what it is now anyway, and break those into regionals. And so where UCLA would play 7 games against the quote unquote West region, and then play 5 games in a rotating basis against the other regions, the South, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, the Midwest, the Northwest, such and such and so on. Kind of like the NFL does now, where you rotate the opposite conference teams you play. Mm-hmm. And I completely am on board with this, where he says college football needs to be separated from every other sport, because college football it's a beast on its own, and there's no point in, like he put it, There's no point in our basketball and our women's volleyball team playing Rutgers instead of playing Arizona. It makes no sense. And you could go back to essentially the Pac-12 or whatever in every other sport but football. Then he thinks that way you can now negotiate instead of the SEC having a contract with ESPN, Big Ten having contracts with Fox. These conferences can now negotiate as one unit like the NFL does. You're going to get more money, right?
Yep.
And then
I would agree.
And the last thing here, he thinks that will in turn lead to revenue sharing for the players. And then basically you could have the conferences instead of the AFC and NFC be sponsored to generate more revenue. Have the Nike conference, the Amazon conference, the Apple conference, whatever the like is. I saw this and just nodded my head along and agreed. Every single thing he said makes absolute sense for where college football is right now.
Well, and I don't see why you don't try to think, how do we make this better for everybody, for the players, for the team? I mean, because it's what Chip says is not something that hurts any one group. It doesn't hurt the players. It certainly doesn't hurt any of the schools. And I think you guys, funny you mentioned it, but I'm pretty sure you guys talked about it on one of the earlier shows this season where you talked about, the volleyball teams and some of these other groups really don't deserve to have to travel all this way just because the football teams do this. The money is not there. Women's volleyball or any other type of volleyball is not making the same type of money. So why treat them that way and force them to have to just go all over the country for no reason? So split it off. I like it more. So the struggle I've had with, especially once we move to this whole playoff format is, we saw it this year. Florida State got boned, right? Like that team deserved a chance. I know the quarterback situation is what it is. But, when you looked at a team like Florida State, they were getting some guys back. They had an edge rusher coming back that was going to be eligible for the playoff, or at least that's what it sounded like, that, really helped make that defense even better. And it's like, okay, so there was some up and down there where I felt bad for that Florida State team or even some of these other teams that deserve a chance. I'm not saying they're going to go into and face Bama and win or face, Oregon and win or Washington and win, whatever the case may be. Like, we need to make the playoff better because when the national championship is played, I want a winner to be deserved of the national championship. So I like where we're going with it, but not only that, then you've got all the NIL money that started coming in. Like these, why not just go all in and just do it like the NFL does it? Because it's not like you're not hiding anything from us at this point. We know it's all about the money, right? Like the players want money, the schools want money, the TVs want money. Like it's all about money. So let's make the most money for these people. Do it the right way. And then at the end, we know who the winner is. We know the best teams in the best conferences, in the best divisions. It just is what it is. But
100% full stop. There's, especially in, you don't want to call them non-revenue sport or
they just don't generate the same type.
They don't generate revenue. So, and those are more of what you would call the student athletes than, let's say, 75% of football players are, right?
Right.
They're Cardell Jones famous. I didn't come here to play school, right?
They're the money makers.
Then those are the guys that generate the money. But so what you're taking student athletes away, like say the softball team. And you're taking them away now because they're going to have to go to the East Coast for probably and stay for like a week, right? Because you're going to play multiple stops over there or whatever, or the volleyball or gymnastics or whatever.
Right.
And because of that, so now you're taking them away from school where they're probably more inclined to be there for the education part of the scholarship than, the actual athletic part of it. So this would be, to me, the simplest and best way to fix it. And everybody gets paid.
Well, you got to get the NCAA out of the conversation. I mean, they seem to be the biggest problem in it all.
And that's where it's headed, I think, more likely than not. All right. So we're all in agreement. Chip Kelly's right. And once he gets fired from UCLA after next season, he can be the new college football commissioner. I like Chip Kelly, though. I love him as a coach, but it's not working out.
No.
Let's move on to the bowl game week 2. We're not going to talk a whole lot about the game last night. I've still got to watch that from the Frisco Bowl last night, Marshall and UTSA. Technically a week 2 bowl game because it started on Tuesday. But I'm not really going to talk about any prospects from this game as much as I want to make us feel old, Brad. Did you see who the 2 starting quarterbacks were last night?
Did you see the post I put in our Discord? Yeah, pictures of
yes,
Pennington, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
So for those who didn't follow the game last night, the 2 starting quarterbacks for UTSA was Owen McCown, son of Josh McCown, and for Marshall it was Cole Pennington, the son of Chad Pennington.
Only Josh McCown would have stayed a backup quarterback for another year or 2. He could have played in the NFL with his son.
There you go.
Like LeBron, right?
Yeah. That was
crazy.
Yeah. So we'll move on now. Tomorrow night, the Boca Raton Bowl in beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. South Florida against Syracuse, 7 p.m. on ESPN. Shane has this one. In my opinion, the best prospect in this game that I think will play is Marlo Wax, the linebacker from Syracuse. Not sure if you had anybody you wanted to touch on here.
Yeah. Is Wax playing?
I hope so.
That was when I was going through this.
As of this point, he hasn't entered the transfer portal or accepted an All-Star game invite, so I'm considering him playing until not.
Yeah, he would have been the first name that I thought of when you started talking bowl games. I was trying to think of anybody from South Florida that might be relevant, but I don't either. I was kind of looking through my notes. I don't think there's necessarily anybody. Oh, Nino asks if Wax is injured, isn't he? I don't know. Let me look.
He could be. I don't know. That would be a reason he wouldn't be playing in the game, I guess.
Let's see here. It doesn't mention if he's been cleared to play or not.
Yep. So guess we'll find out along with everybody else tomorrow night. Gasparilla Bowl on Friday night. Shane will be watching Georgia Tech and UCF. This is a 5:30 kickoff. It's weird kick time, right? On a Friday. Or if they had some NBA games or something on Friday and they needed a lead in. For Georgia Tech, I am a fan of their corner, LaMiles Brooks. Love his size and length. For UCF, John Reese Plumlee's fun. I don't think he's an NFL player at quarterback, maybe as a wide receiver, or maybe he goes back to playing baseball. Don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's Plumlee 2 years ago would have been more exciting to talk about than he is now, I think. But I wouldn't mind seeing the D tackle Barber. Is that his name? I'm
a fan. I'm a fan of Ricky Barber. Transfer from Auburn, I believe.
Yeah,
I'm a fan.
So he'd be one that I would at least want to keep an eye on and see how he does. I mean, this is when you look at the matchup, it seems like kind of a weird game on paper to see. I'm not entirely sure because neither offensive line is super stellar. So Barber could have a really fun game and kind of stand out because I think he's one of those guys that I wouldn't mind seeing go outside and play more as like an edge in a 3-4 look. So
yeah,
he'd be one that I want to look at.
Yeah, he's definitely probably going to be a 5 tech probably at the next level. Yeah, I don't see him being an interior guy much. Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on ABC, I'll be watching Duke and Troy in the Birmingham Bowl. Duke has been just torn apart in the portal here. Troy, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if Javon Solomon's going to play. He has accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl. Reddy Stewart, their corner, accepted an invite to the Hoogle Bowl. I'm still waiting to see Richard Gibonor. I love this guy. He's a freak length athlete at 6'3", 228. I predicted him in my Senior Bowl predictions that he would go there. I don't know if that's where he ends up. Maybe he goes to Shrine. Maybe he ends up at the Hula. I don't know. But he's a 6-year player. I don't know what his eligibility situation is. Kamani Vidal, their running back's also super good.
What about Jordan Waters from Duke? What do you think about him?
He transferred. He actually committed to he committed to someone yesterday. I can't remember who.
But so he was when I was looking at the game, he was the first name I thought of. Transfer. Where did he go to?
It just came across yesterday. Right. It just came across yesterday.
He went to NC State.
There you go. So he went right down the road.
Yeah, that's an interesting move. I wonder why Duke got hit so hard, though. I mean,
their coach left.
Teams. Yeah, but you would think that, I mean, depending on what the new coach, I mean, I don't mind the new staff. Like, I'd be interested to see some of these guys in this, but they obviously
it could have been one of them deals where they'd say, you ain't got to go, but you can't stay here.
It's a Coach Prime situation. He was telling them they had baggage, eh?
There you go. Arkansas State, Northern Illinois, 11 a.m. on ESPN. I'll be watching this one from the capital city of Alabama in Montgomery at the Camellia Bowl, the famous Crampton Bowl, they call it, the stadium. I've been there, covered the Camellia Bowl a few years ago. It ain't much to look at. But for Arkansas State, it's not a whole lot happening for either of these teams, to be honest. Corey Rucker, the receiver for Arkansas State, was at South Carolina for a song after transferring from Arkansas State. So, he's okay.
What have you watched any of Nolan Porter, the offensive lineman from Northern Illinois?
I have not. Not a whole lot.
He'd been the only name that popped off for me that, as I was looking at the game, like, oh, no, maybe.
Well, I'll be watching this game. This is the first time I've actually had Northern. That's why I took this game. I haven't watched either of these schools this year, so I figured I'd get a look at him.
Taste of it.
Yeah, 2:30 p.m. on Saturday on ABC. I'll be watching the Armed Forces Bowl between Air Force and James Madison. Obviously, it's hard to look at Air Force and get, because you don't know what the military commitments and all that. James Madison's another team that is their coach left. We're all transferring out. But I have in the past enjoyed watching their offensive tackle, Nick Kidwell, 6'6", 315.
Offensive lineman is what I'm trying to get better at scouting. I've been working hard at trying to learn more about the offensive lineman. So I try to watch the trenches a little bit more the last 6-8 months. And it's interesting to see how the NFL looks at some of these guys. But Kidwell definitely would have been one of those names that stood out. So that'll be fun to see what you think about that game. Yeah,
Nino, big fan of Rayshawn Thomas, the pass rusher for Northern Illinois. So another name to focus on there. 2:30 p.m. on ESPN, Shane will be watching the famous Idaho Potato Bowl from the Blue Turf. Georgia State and Utah State. I tell you, I watched Utah State earlier, and the skinny, fast wide receiver is in the NFL now, and Terrell Vaughn from Utah State is that 5'7", 170, fifth-year player. I got to watch in that game.
Well, they have, was it Van Leeuwen is the other one, and he's pretty small and skinny, isn't he?
They have had quite a few small, skinny wide receivers over these last few years.
I don't know that I've seen much of them, but yeah.
6 p.m. on ESPN, I'll be watching live in Mobile. I'll be in the press box for the 68 Ventures Bowl, formerly known as the Lending Tree Bowl, formerly known as the Dollar General Bowl, formerly known as the GMAC Bowl. Eastern Michigan against the home team, South Alabama. LaDamian Webb is not going to play. He is banged up, not going to play. Dante Lucas, their guard, Florida State transfer, is going to play, but immediately after has said he's going in the portal. But at least he's playing in the game.
A little bit of something.
The best prospect in this game would have been Colin Lacey, the wide receiver for South Alabama, but he is portaled out to Louisville. So, in my opinion, the best prospect in this game now, by default, is South Alabama safety Yam Banks.
Yeah, I mean Eastern. As much as I'm from the Ypsilanti area, so Eastern Michigan was in my backyard for a long time, and outside of Crosby, they haven't had a ton of talent come out of there as of late. So
yeah,
that'll be interesting to see how they hold up going down there.
Yeah, to point this out, we have 4 players from Eastern Michigan on our watch list, and 2 of them are specialists, and the other 2 are running backs, including Samson Evans, as Nino points out there. 6:30 Saturday night on ABC, I'll be watching the Las Vegas Bowl between Northwestern and Utah, and I imagine we'll get a good amount of prospects in this game for sure. But Jonah Ellis, the edge rusher for Utah, third-year player, big sack numbers this year. Want to see him.
Yeah, he's definitely been. I mean, I wouldn't. For me, it's tight ends with Utah, or I wouldn't mind seeing Queeth. I mean, because he's a guy that's kind of been up and down throughout his collegiate career, as somebody that's people have been excited about and then not excited about, and then now, I mean, especially after watching last week's show, talking about the weak tight end class after your top two, it's like, could a guy like Queeth stand out and start making a name for himself and maybe pushing? But yeah, and Cole Bishop would have been fun to watch. But yeah,
Ellis opted out apparently as well. Didn't see that. So did Cole Bishop. So this game's just gone to crap already. Northwestern, I got nothing for those guys. We'll see. I'm anxious to see it. Thomas Yasmin, their other tight end, is not a lot of numbers, but he's got some NFL skill set. And closing it out on Saturday night, I'll be watching 9:30 p.m. on ESPN, the Hawaii Bowl, Coastal Carolina and San Jose State. Coastal Carolina, of course, Grayson McCall, their quarterback, has portaled out to NC State, I believe. Mm-hmm. I like their running back, Braden Bennett, because I was a big fan of his dad at South Carolina back in the day, Brandon Bennett. Sam Pinckney, their wide receiver, also a solid player. I was impressed with Chevin Cordero, the quarterback for San Jose State, transfer from Hawaii. He jumped out to me when I watched them earlier this season.
Yeah, I mean, for me, San Jose State always seems to have running backs that you want to keep an eye on. They don't necessarily always pan out, but I always try to keep an eye on what's happening in the backfield there. Yeah,
I don't know if he's the starter, but when I watched them last year, Kyrie Robinson, their running back, 5'8", 200 pounds, he was a good player last year for them. So that's going to do it. We're going to wrap up our week 2 bowl game. You heard my name a lot. I basically took almost every single game from the first 2 weeks of the bowl. Shane's going to be just dogging it the last week of the bowl games. I only got a handful there.
Especially as many prospects as there will be in those last bowl games. I mean,
right.
He's going to be busy.
He will be a busy man. That is for sure. All right. Well, let's get to the all-star game of choice around here. As, like I've said, it's played in the same stadium as the 68 Ventures Bowl, Hancock Whitney Stadium in Mobile, which, as I've told everybody before, is a literal 3-mile drive from my neighborhood. I have to make one right turn, and it's a straight shot. So it's an awesome location for me, and like I said, is the best thing going about the city of Mobile. Not as many acceptances this week. Feel like the numbers have come down a little bit, but we right now are at 92 total Senior Bowl acceptances. And so we'll go through the ones from this week. Nathaniel Watson, the linebacker from Mississippi State, 6th-year player, 6'2", 240, has committed to the game.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Wow. I mean, that, the funny thing is the Senior Bowl rosters have really – it's such an interesting time to see how these guys go into it. But the Senior Bowl rosters, I mean, such good talent. And Jim Nagy's done a great job making the Senior Bowl must-watch. I mean, so anytime a player shows up on there, I mean, you got to pay attention. So
you got to.
I haven't got to watch much of Watson, though.
Like 90% of their players get drafted that play at the game. So you have to. If you see a name, you got to pay attention.
He's Mississippi State, right, Watson?
Yes. There's a couple of offensive tackles that committed a game, and both of them could push into that first-round territory. I'm not as high right now on Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, 5th-year player, 6'7", 316, as much as I am the other offensive tackle that committed to Elise Fuaga from Oregon State, who I think could push into the top 15.
About to say, I've seen a few mocks that have him top 20, so it seems like the consensus is starting to push that direction as well.
Right. Big defensive lineman ad for this week. Oregon's Brandon Dorlus, who has just kept his ascension up. Shane thinks he could push into the first round by the time the process is over. At the very least, an early second-round pick.
Well, and at his size and the way that he plays, he really could fit. He could be very versatile. I mean, he is light, a little under 300, so people might not see him as a pure, 3-tech kind of defensive tackle. I could see him bump out to the edge a little bit more. But Oregon's going to have plenty of draftable prospects this year, and it's fun to see.
Yes.
I mean, I think draft season could really help his stock too, though. I think he could produce better numbers and really shoot up the boards there.
Texas had another commitment. This is now their fifth, the fifth Longhorn that's committed to the game, and there will be another one had an invite accepted. They just haven't formally announced it yet. So Texas is going to have at least 6 guys at the game. But linebacker Jalen Ford, 6'3", 236. That's nice off the hoof right there.
He creeped into my top 10 when it came to my linebacker rankings that I posted up on the site. One of the last couple articles I did. He's interesting. I really like what Ford can do. I don't necessarily think he showed out as well in that Texas defense, but I think he's got some potential, and it's cool to see him take a Senior Bowl invite. That'll be fun to see how he stacks up with the rest of them. No doubt.
Another linebacker committed, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm going to give it a try here. Washington linebacker Edifwan Uafosio, 6'1", 230, 6-year player. We're just going to call him Eddie.
He's on my list. Yeah, he's on my list. I haven't gotten to him at this point in time, but yes, I saw the name and butchered it myself. So you did great. Yeah. Much better than me.
Mentioned him earlier when we were talking about Troy, but edge rusher Javon Solomon, 6'2", 245 pounds, probably going to stand up at linebacker at the Senior Bowl. If I had to guess based off the height there, he'll be asked to stand up and practice. So we'll see how he does with the back pedal and the coverage and all that. That Brad, if that's one thing that if you can gather, like if you get a hold of the Senior Bowl tape and stuff, the film, watch how these defensive ends have to stand up and see how they transition in some of those drills. It's fun to see, man. You see, and you can see who can do it and who can't really quick. But so I imagine Solomon will be asked to do that. But one of the leaders in the FBS in sacks, over 16 sacks this year for Troy.
He's an impact player. I mean, he could be fun for one of those teams that's looking for a guy to just attack off the edge because he's a disruptor. I mean, he played well in that defense, and like you said, he's one of the top sack artists in college football. So I love him. I think he could stand out with a really good Senior Bowl and then continue through draft season, and he could be one of those guys that shoots up the board and we see early day 2, early mid day 2. It wouldn't be a surprise, right, for a team looking for that kind of player. Yeah.
And finally, Michael Pratt's teammate, wide receiver Jaquan Jackson from Tulane. Another one of those guys, terrific, got great feet, probably going to be a slot guy. Those guys tend to stand out in those one-on-ones. Like, look at Tank Dell last year. Along this year comes Jaquan Jackson, 5'10", 185 receiver from Tulane.
Well, and these are the times for those types of guys to use whatever elite trait they have to stand out, right? Like, he wasn't going to show out at Tulane. I mean, they're not producing tons of wide receiver talent in the NFL, but if he has, and I think the tape shows that he's got nice burst. I mean, that's the one thing I noticed, and I haven't watched a ton of them, but the little bit I did watch was like, oh, this guy's pretty explosive. I mean, he's in the wrong offense to really show his skill set, but I mean, you've seen it plenty of times at the Senior Bowl when there's just that one receiver, whether it's a CMU guy or whatever, that shows out and just destroys DBs.
And you see it every year at the Senior Bowl in the practice and the one-on-ones is you have guys like him and Jaden Reed and Tank Dell and these small, shifty wide receivers. All of these corners that you see come to the Senior Bowl, for the most part, are 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", bigger guys. They got the length that the NFL wants. That's why you see those guys brought in. But those receivers, man, they make them guys look bad a lot of times. And to me, when you see a corner that can handle that, then that's a guy. Last year, Tyreek Stevenson, who's had some success this year for the Bears, he was one of those corners that handled himself well. So that's another thing to watch when you see the Senior Bowl practice tape.
Yeah, all right, those small, twitchy receivers, definitely. Yep. You're right, 100%.
All right, last thing here on the docket, underclassmen declarations. Only 3 this week, and when I'm not counting some of these other guys that have declared for the draft that are 4th, 5th, 6th year guys. I just presume they're all coming in anyway. So if like third-year guys that declare, we'll talk about them on the show. And these are all your fantasy guy, Brad. These are all skill position players that declared this week. 2 running backs and a receiver. We'll start with the backs. Audric Estime from Notre Dame.
I mean, my surprise face. Everybody expected him to come out. I mean, he wasn't really going to do anything more at Notre Dame. And this is the perfect year for a guy like that to come out because the running back group is not strong, right? You guys talked about it last week with Travis. I mean, you got Trey Benson, maybe Travion Henderson. I don't know. Is he coming out or not coming out? I don't think we still heard yet.
He has not announced.
So outside of that, you got Braylon Allen. I mean, there's not a lot of top-end talent. So if a guy like Estime comes out, shows out well at the combine, and maybe does some things great in the interviews, I mean, he could push into the consideration for one of the top few running backs drafted this year. Nobody's going in the first round, but,
And nor should they ever.
Right. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is proving that it wasn't a terrible idea, but, Bijan Robinson certainly ain't proving it.
That's a big
not
point
their
of
fault.
That's a big point of contention right now in the fantasy community, right?
It is. It's, but it's not the player's fault, right? I mean, Atlanta is just a weird situation.
Fire Arthur Smith, hashtag. The other running backs to declare this week was Jalen Wright of Tennessee.
Oh. Yeah, I don't. He could have gone for another year, and I think it probably would have been better for him. Like, I wonder what round they told him he'd be going in, because I don't necessarily see him as a fringe draftable prospect. I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one for me in the evaluation. I just don't know. I mean,
I guess for him. And the good thing for a guy like Jalen Wright, though, by declaring now, he can get on an All-Star game roster now. He can play in the Senior Bowl now. He can play in the Shrine Bowl. So he'll have that opportunity to get in one of those games and maybe up his draft stock a little bit. Go to the combine. Maybe he's really fast. I don't know. Interested to see. And finally, wide receiver. This guy could be a first-round guy, right? At worst, probably early second. Troy Franklin, wide receiver from Oregon. Big, fast wide receiver, right?
I have him in my first round. When I think tomorrow's article is actually my top 15 receivers or something.
There you go.
Franklin,
we're going to look forward to that.
I'm about to say I have him as a first round receiver. I mean, Oregon's offense was humming this year, right? But Troy Franklin's been good his entire career. Like, when you've watched him in college, there hasn't been a point where I was like, man, this kid just isn't ready for the situation. I mean, he looks the part. He's big, but he's kind of more lean. I think he's still under 190 pounds, but he's 6'3". Explosiveness is there. The hands are there. You watch him. He can high point the ball. He tracks it well. He's physical enough to fight the DBs for it. I mean, there's nothing. If this class didn't have Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr., like, you could argue Troy Franklin could be in that conversation with Odunze as one of the top receivers in the class. But, it's unfortunate the wrong year for him to try to come out because there's so many good receivers in this class. But he should be in the first round. If you see 5 or 6 receivers go, he's going to be one of them.
He's one of those guys. Yeah, I agree. All right, so that's going to do it there. We did get one question. We'll get to that in just a second. But I want to have a little fun. Last year, me and Shane, on our Go Home edition of the podcast before Christmas, we named our top 5 Christmas movies. Shane went the traditional route with, your wholesome Christmas movies, where my top 3 were, from 3 to 1 was Gremlins, Bad Santa, and Die Hard. Brad, I know, and this is why I had you on tonight. I know you are a Die Hard is the number 1 Christmas movie guy, just like me. We're Die Hard to the bone, through and through.
Die Hard and Christmas Vacation are my 2 favorite Christmas movies, and they're on the watch list every single year.
100%.
Die Hard is classic movie, great action. Wholesome story about a man trying to reunite with his wife. I mean, I don't even understand why people
trying to go to see his kids on Christmas. What's more Christmas than that?
I don't know. And it's got an awesome soundtrack. You get a little Christmas in Hollis. I mean, you get some good stuff on there too. I mean, it's a great movie. And this time of year you need great movies, and that's what that is.
Yeah. So I thought we'd have a little fun, Brad. So opposed to Super 4. We all know the best characters in the movie, John McClane. and Hans Gruber, right? They're the best. Who are the best side characters from Die Hard? The guys that aren't going to get the top billing. Who are the best side characters from Die Hard?
I mean, it has to be Sergeant Powell. I mean, that's got to be it, right?
Right.
Went on to be a great, wholesome dad in Family Matters. But in this movie,
after transferring to the Chicago Police Department, right?
After going to the Chicago Police Department, he was done out there on the coast. Yeah, I mean, he does such a great job. I mean, just trying to get some delicious Twinkies and enjoy his Christmas Eve, and then all of a sudden, these terrorists come and mess with him and shoot at him and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, every time he comes in, just he's funny, he's quick-witted, he's got some good one-liners in the movie. I mean, how can you not love Sergeant Powell? Who's yours?
We talked. You mentioned Argyle, the limo driver, very good, integral part of the movie. I like to dig a little deeper here. I like not just but to me, Ellis, right? Ellis has to get consideration here. Hans, Booby, he's his white knight, man.
Ellis might have been the dumbest character in the movie, but certainly played some pivotal moments there, right?
Right. Man, all he wanted to do was get a nice watch and do some cocaine on Christmas Eve, man. What a guy.
It was a white Christmas for him.
No doubt. Honorable mention to me, Sergeant Robinson from the LAPD. I thought he had some good liners, good one-liners in the movie. Looks like we're going to need some more FBI guys. I mean, it's good stuff.
Then the FBI guys were pretty funny when they're,
right.
What was that? In the copter, he's like,
especially,
gosh, I can't think of the line.
Oh, it's like just like Saigon, eh, Ace? He's like, I was in junior high. Oh, classic!
Such a good movie.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for tonight's episode. Let's go. I forgot to answer a question here.
Right?
One question. Nino asks,
"Love Nino.
Does Nick Saban retire if Bama wins the Natty?"
They're not getting past Michigan. Let's be honest here. Michigan is going to show Jalen Monroe how defense played, right? I mean, that's how this is going to work. I will say I'm a Michigan fan, so hopefully Bama doesn't do what TCU did to us last year. But, yeah, no, it's hard to see Saban retire, right? Like, he just kind of writes his own check at this point. So he's running the program, and it's all his. Why retire? I mean, unless you have something better to do. I got to think his kids are grown by now.
Right. And to me, if he does retire, which I don't think he will, even if they win the national championship, but Disney's got a blank check waiting on him. It's the day he hangs it up. It becomes their top college football analyst the next day.
Well, and even in the summer, I'm pretty sure a couple folks asked him in the summer if this was it this year. Said, what is he, 70, 71, 72, somewhere in there. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't think he's, at this point, I don't think it's broke, right? I know people were nervous about, what was going on with Jalen Monroe and it wasn't working. I will go on record and say I believed in Jalen Monroe the whole time. So you haters, I don't like Alabama, but I like Jalen Monroe. I don't see why they would change what they're doing. He's produced good coaches. He's helped get Sark over there in Texas. I mean, all these other things have come from his kind of what he's done. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a big Saban guy. He coached for Michigan State, and after that, he was dead to me. So, from there, but you got to respect what he's built, and what he's done for the game. As much as I don't necessarily love when teams win a bunch of national championships in a row. I love the parity. He seems to have figured out the secret sauce. So I don't know why you would quit when you're still at the top of your game, which it seems like he is. What do you think?
Yeah. I like I said, I don't think he retires even if they win the championship. And I think they will. But
how dare you come in here with that kind of tomfoolery?
Well, man, I may have mentioned a handful of times where I live on this one episode of the show. So not to mention my Alabama alumni wife that's in the next room right now. So
I won't hold it against her. I will not hold it against her.
It is what it is.
Rolling tide on this show. No rolling tide. Go blue.
But me and Shane will talk more about those games next week and probably give our official predictions, although I kind of just gave mine. unofficially there. But final thoughts, Brad, on everything going on with you, Draft Countdown, and where everybody can, find you.
Yeah, buckle up, man. It's been great, being able to write and edit content and kind of learn from a lot of the guys that are in the community. And you guys, you and Shane are just awesome. I love working with you guys and just picking people's brains and pulling up that information. Probably the most prevalent place to find me would be over on Twitter. Roto Heat Brad. I do fantasy content. I do NFL content, NFL draft content mostly. Like to talk all things football. Actually, if you follow me on Twitter, it's probably more funny than football because there's so many amazing people in the community. It's like I'll say things if I need to, but otherwise I'm just behind the scenes writing and editing up your guys' stuff. I probably will throw some of myself into the videos more just to help out and add some extra pieces to it. But here is the best place. YouTube is where it's at. I mean, we're working hard and the channel's growing. Appreciate anybody that checks us out that's been a new subscriber over the last few months. We've been having leaps and bounds on the channel. So, just keep liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell so you can see when these guys go live and then me behind the scenes tinkering and making them look good.
There you go. And you've been doing a heck of a job getting those the shorts and everything up. We appreciate it so much. But that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the Draft Countdown podcast. As always, like Brad said, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Get notified when we go live. If you listen to this on the audio version of the show, be it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts, give us a 5-star review. Share that out stuff, man. We would really appreciate that. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Brad on Twitter at RotoHeatBrad. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. And as always, for 24/7, 365 draft coverage, go to draftcountdown.com. As always, good night, everybody.
Merry Christmas.